So, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the fact that after just over 100 days in office, Rishi Sunak is up to his neck in so much sleaze, there's literally no time to discuss what he's actually doing in government. Yesterday, he finally did what everyone knew he'd have to ages ago and fired Nadhim Zahawi as chairman of the Conservative Party after an internal ethics inquiry found out that, yes, turns out, not paying the proper tax, shuffling all your shares offshore to Gibraltar, and then being told to cough up a huge fine by the taxman is in fact wrong. Alison, what strikes me here is that Rishi wanted to follow due process, tick all his boxes on the fire the Tory chairman spreadsheet, but he seems to lack any of the political or awareness or nous that should have told him, for his own sake and that of the party, he needed to go last week.
He really did, and also for the sake of the country, because I think the whole country's been looking at this story for about a fortnight now with some level of depth, when we should really have been discussing things like the fact that people can't get an ambulance to take them to hospital or the cost of living crisis. But this has sort of sucked all the oxygen out of all the national conversation. And this is the worst possible scenario for Rishi Sunak, in that he's lost his Conservative Party chairman, as we knew he would. But this was always going to happen. So now all that's happened is that he looks weak because he didn't deal with it a fortnight ago, when any other person would have said, call him in, say to him, did you have to pay a fine on your tax? Were you straight about it last summer when you first being asked questions about it? The two answers to that would have then instantly meant that he had to stand down then, other than going through this palaver of an inquiry. And now he's had to get rid of him. And so for Sunak himself, it has made him look weak, which is because he did come in and he said it was all going to be about professionalism, accountability and integrity. It's destroyed that as well, even though I'm sure that was what he wanted. Those things don't happen by accident. You only get integrity and accountability and professionalism if you make really hard decisions at the right moment. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, he wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, it's really weird, I suppose, in a way. I mean, he's got his party behind him. His whole point, the whole reason for him to be there is that he is not as morally squalid as Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Or is quite as much of an economic lunatic as Liz Truss. And all he has to do when he's faced with a moral quandary is act decisively, and that's it. But he seems to be so weak or uncertain that he just isn't able to exert that discipline.
But I do think he probably thought, I need to go through this due process. But regardless of all of that, Nadhim Zahawi had made him personally look ridiculous. And that he'd been on Prime Minister's Questions the week before last and said, look, there's nothing going on here. And then the following week, then he himself finds out Zahawi paid a fine. So Zahawi had made Sunak look stupid for that reason alone. If you're the boss, you're going to say to him, look, you've made me look an absolute idiot in front of the whole country. It clearly stinks. You're going to have to go. But It was like he didn't have the courage to do that unless he had a bit of paper that was signed by an independent person saying, yeah, no, don't worry, you can do that now. He just didn't have the gumption to do it himself.
And we saw Zahawi there with Boris Johnson. It's exactly the kind of thing that Boris Johnson did when his ministers had problems. He just held on to them. He didn't want to fire anyone. But that was because he saw that whatever anyone else did wrong, literally there was nothing wrong in Boris Johnson.
I mean, you've got to remember Zahawi was very much, in that Boris camp, wasn't he? I mean, remember, he was the one that wrote that piece for the was it the Telegraph on the night that he thought that Boris was going to go through with standing to become PM this time, and then he pulled out at the last minute. So they're sort of all cut from that same cloth. But all the more reason why Sunak needs to distance himself for them if he really does want to show that he's different. And he's got these 5 pledges for the year ahead. He should be absolutely ruthless in jettisoning anybody who's preventing him from speaking about them 5 pledges.
Exactly, and I don't even know what the 5 pledges are, and I pay attention. So that's how bad it is.
But then we've got the whole Dominic Raab thing is still bubbling under it, and that's going to burst onto the surface. And I mean, that sounds terrible. The bullying allegations against Dominic Raab.
Exactly. So these are some of the other things we've got. The sleaze that's now hanging around. As Leslie says there, Carol Vorderman has made some claims about Rishi being involved in some insider trading in his previous job. We've got Dominic Raab, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, who was appointed despite the fact that he goes on holiday to places where the beach is shut and lets people in Afghanistan absolutely cark it. He was being investigated over 8 bullying claims, which over the weekend we've been told may actually be now 24. And we've had, poor Rishi must be thinking that, oh God, I wish all I'd done wrong was not wear a seatbelt. We've had Gavin Williamson resign over bullying claims. We've got Suella Braverman reappointed as Home Secretary 6 days after she had to resign as Home Secretary because she national security breach. And then he's had these 2 fixed penalty notices as well. And now, as Leslie says, there's talk about insider trading. Alan says, so Sunak is showing his strength, is he? So what day does Braverman get sacked then? There are quite a few, Alison, that if you wanted to clean out those stables, you would need quite a big broom to get them all out.
You would, and I guess the main reason he's not doing it is he's scared of what the fallout might be. I mean, apparently there are concerns that Zahawi may yet come back because he feels that he's been very badly treated and that he didn't have an opportunity to defend himself properly, and he's going to start dishing the dirt on Sunak. So obviously Sunak's sort of on this tightrope because he doesn't want to upset people too much because he's fighting that they're going to group, I don't know, back with Boris Johnson, whoever, and topple him. So to that point, how can the country be held to ransom by this little group of people with their sort of morally questionable behaviour that are too worried about upsetting each other to actually clean up the operation?
Exactly. I mean, how can Zahawi claim he didn't get a chance to defend himself when he had a year of journalists going after him, a year of firing illegal letters at them, spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds on big name law firms, trying to shut everything down, calling it smears?
I did think that was the most repellent thing about his letter yesterday. And so at no point does he apologise for his, and this isn't the press saying that he's done something wrong at this point. This is an independent advisor has found 7 breaches of the ministerial code. So 7 times he could have held his hand up and told the whole story, but he didn't. So that's not the press, that's an independent person that's come up with that. And yet in his letter, there's no apology for it. All there is one like little attack on the press when he was the one, as you say, that was instructing lawyers to shut down legitimate inquiry into what was going on. And we're seeing, aren't we, Susie, way too much of this now, of very rich individuals using their wealth to silence investigations into things that the public has a right to know. Because we pay their wages, they work for us, therefore they have to tell us what's going on. And this idea that they shouldn't, we're all sort of a slight inconvenience, they don't want to talk to us, it's just not good enough.
No, it's disgusting. And when you think about the fact, not only do we pay their wages, but they say that no one's paying enough tax to pay us more. For goodness sake. Who's not paying the tax? Nadhim, Rishi, Mrs. Rishi. Right then, there's the problem, isn't it? But now, I think it's to do with nous and it's to do with self-awareness and actually caring how it looks. I think Rishi probably, maybe because he never had any working class friends as a boy, he doesn't know how bad this looks and how we could all predict last week Nadhim's going, Rishi's going to look bad if he doesn't do it himself.
My only thing about Rishi, and I've never met the guy, so I've literally got no idea, but my gut feeling is it a lack of confidence? When you're in a job and you feel like you're slightly out of your depth, you don't want to upset too many people because you're just not quite sure what to do. It feels a bit like that to me, that he's just not quite sure what to do, and so he's doing nothing.
I don't think someone who's been through Winchester, has made hundreds of millions of pounds, is married to the daughter of a billionaire, and then decides he ought to run the country, really lacks confidence.
No, you're probably right.
I think he lacks awareness. I think he wants to say, well, I'm going to do the right thing now, so I'm going to follow the personnel protocol for firing this person. Yeah. And it's politics. It's how you look that is matter. Yeah. And you can still go through that process, but be much tougher at the start and be clearer at the start because you know where it's going to end up. Now, Mike says, I imagine most of those non-UK born refugees from violence who arrive here on small boats won't be trying to avoid paying their UK tax when they get here and make a life for themselves. Nadhim Zahawi was praised by Rishi Sunak in his letter as a child of Kurdish refugees for having done so well. Amazingly, I think another child of Kurdish refugees who didn't pay his tax would probably be on the first plane to Rwanda. Leslie says they're also telling us we don't know how to budget, when in fact they're restricting our spending power by not reining in the profiteering. Right, Leslie. Keep asking your questions, everybody. Now, there's the letters between the two of them are just extraordinary, because normally when you have these firing and resignation letters, they say, thank you so much for working for me. It's been absolutely marvellous. You did so well. And the other person goes, thank you so much. Let me work for you. I really enjoyed it. And we did do so well together, didn't we? Even if they hate each other's guts. But this one, Rishi wrote a letter making it quite clear that Zahawi had acted unethically and he'd been fired. And Zahawi just wrote back saying that he was great, everything he did was great, and it's just the press that were the problem. Not a single bit of regret or I'm sorry that I dragged you into this, or I hope that, the Tory party will probably do better without me as chairman, or anything like that. No self-awareness, which is, I suspect, why he made some of these cock-ups in the first place. Now, it's worth pointing out, right, when you get a government job, you have to fill in a form about your declaration of interest. And there is a box on this form that says, are you under investigation by the HMRC? And now Nadhim Zahawi had 3 government jobs. And while this was all ongoing, and each time he had to fill in a form, and each time he said, nope, not applicable. No problem here. So while he was being investigated, while he was being questioned in person by the taxman, while he was negotiating a settlement with the taxman, and after he had settled with the taxman and paid that bill, he just said, no.
And all it does do is just say to the rest of the country that the normal rules do not apply to them. So the rest of us, this week, today, tomorrow, so many self-employed people are going to be busy trying to fill in their tax returns before the end of the deadline, and worrying about it, thinking, have I done this correctly? Have I filled in that bit correctly? Because otherwise I'll be in all sorts of trouble. Whereas they've blindly gone through doing whatever they like on their tax returns without any concern that the normal rules apply to them. It is staggering.
I got a letter from the taxman last week saying, you've got to pay your tax, don't you, Mrs. Self-Assessment? And I said, oh, yeah, no, the accountant had sent me that a couple of months ago and I completely forgot to do it.
I did wonder yesterday whether that was one reason why they'd asked for this to get wrapped up really quickly. Because I did wonder if they hadn't finished it before the end of the month, all those people that didn't get their tax returns in before the end of January, would they legitimately be able to say, well, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, he hasn't bothered to do his properly. Why am I going to bother to do mine? And
that's
where one falls down, isn't it?
There's a penalty for late filing. So that's not about a carelessness penalty by the taxman. You have to pay that flat. If you don't file by the end of January, I think it's 200 quid or something, because I've never done it. So I don't know. I think it's about 200-300 quid. And you pay that penalty just as a flat if you don't get it in on time.
Yeah.
Then if it's not right, then they come back to you and say, well, is this intentional or carelessness or what? And it's not easily avoidable. Jan Jarvis says, why can't we push for a vote of no confidence in this government and have a general election? How much longer do we have to put up with this corruption? The answer to your question, Jan, bearing in mind 100 days into Rishi's term of office, is about another 300 days before he has to call another general election, which has to, I think the latest it can happen is January 2024. So the question, Alison.
He's a quarter of the way through, which is a significant chunk. You need to be turning the tide, certainly by halfway, don't you? So, he's going to run out of time pretty swiftly.
Well, this is the question. Is he going to make it that far? And how much worse can it get?
I think he'll continue because, unless the Conservative Party is absolutely determined to destroy itself, I can't see why they would go through another process of appointing a new leader. I know Boris Johnson wants to come back, but surely that feels too soon. Surely to any right-minded person. And I just think I know there are lots and lots of people who love Boris Johnson for whatever reason, but there are a significant number of people in this country who just think he's a chancer, and he might be entertaining on the telly or writing a newspaper column, but do we really want him as our Prime Minister?
Yeah, last time I heard anyway, he can't afford to be Prime Minister.
No.
He's got to go up recently. John says, they're all crooks. It's like chipping at a mountain with a toffee hammer. What a Marvellous picture you've created for us, John. Elaine says, yeah, another leader. It'll be a general election for sure. I think if they tried to do it again, Elaine, impose another leader on us, there would actually be people out on the streets this time. And it would probably be the grannies going, we've had enough. Yeah. And Rod Stewart would be there at the front, leading in the charge.